Hey everyone, this is Sasha introducing Arca's NFT Creator Series. Today we have Art on Internet, otherwise known as AOI, joining us for the next episode in this series. Stoked to get you on the phone. How are you doing today?
I'm going really, really well, thank you. It's a pleasure to be on the phone with you, Sasha, and I'm really, really excited about all the amazing things we're going to chat about.
Yeah, me as well. First, for those that don't know, do you want to start off by telling us a bit about yourself and how you got involved in the space as well as what your project does?
Yeah, sure, definitely. So I would say probably about over a year ago now was when I first bought my first NFT, and it was at that moment where I realized that this wasn't just some scam or wasn't some sort of you know moving sort of art that's happening. And yeah, the first time I bought an NFT, before that, let's go right to the beginning. Before that, I heard about NFTs. I saw that people were paying crazy prices for them, and I was like, before I really bought my first one, I was like, hey, you know what? It's just a JPEG on the internet. It's just an image on the internet. How can where does the value come from? And all this sort of stuff. And I bought my first NFT, and within literally, I would say a minute of buying it, the artist reached out to me on Twitter, and we had a dialogue and we had a chat. And from that moment, I realized that NFTs were more than just a JPEG. It's one of the most impressive sort of things that I realized was it is literally art with these incredible network sort of channels that combine together, and it was just breathtaking. I spoke with this artist, I learned about the artist, I learned about the what she or he was making at the time, and yeah, like within a minute of buying the NFT, it was like, I was in the shoes of the artist. I could really feel the artist, I could understand the artist, and from that moment I was hooked. And yeah, from that moment, I created art on the internet. I was like, hey, originally it started off as a means of just collecting art and getting to understand the space better. And then from collecting more artists now, I kind of want to do more to help all the artists of the internet. So at the moment, we're working on actually we were just about to launch our own sort of membership club called Whitelist. We designed this so we could really create artists and really showcase the story of artists. We're working on a NFT documentary as well, sometime mid to end of the year, called the NFT film. So yeah, that's just a quick little snapshot of art on internet and AOI.
Awesome. What like in that same vein, how do you think that NFTs have changed? You talked a lot about how there's an easier access to the artists themselves and direct relationship. But how do you think it's changed the landscape for creators themselves? I believe I saw like a stat somewhere on the growth of first time artists in the NFT space and all the revenues that they've generated from their sales relative to them. Like historically, it would be very difficult for them to enter a traditional auction house or be commissioned. What kind of value have you seen being unlocked for creators?
You know what? It's almost life changing value. You have people from the most remote places in the world, and through creativity and through art, they're able to support themselves, their family, and in some places potentially even their own sort of cities. There's an artist called Andres Racinger, who created these incredible NFTs, but he did a project where he was building wells in these remote locations, and I think we're only tapping the start of NFTs as a source of sort of regeneration and a source of sort of building up communities and all this sort of stuff. I had another call just recently where people are starting to create these sort of art studios in certain poor countries, and they're hoping that through rehabilitating sort of, I guess, a neighborhood and the artists and everything that through the sale of NFTs, they can support communities and yeah, really change the world. I think that's one of the things that is happening there. Sure, you've got artists that have made millions of NFTs, and that's, I think it's a very positive thing, because when people see that you can make millions of NFTs, right, you start to get this influx of everyday artists that are non-NFT related jump into the scene. Like, you know what, I'm going to try and mint NFTs now and try and make a living. It's positive and a negative. In the last year, we've gone from a few concentrated NFT native artists to now you're starting to see some big names that are out of the NFT world trying to get into the NFT space. And what I've noticed is that it's all NFTs are all about community, and when you have an artist that is not sort of part of the NFT community enter the space, you start getting sort of like, I can explain it, like it's sort of, sometimes it's not authentic. You start getting these celebrities mint NFTs, and a lot of the community will see it and be like, okay, it's a cash grab. It's not real. It's kind of not, yeah, it just doesn't feel right. And what we've noticed, right, is the community does react badly to projects that involve celebrities and non-native NFT artists. So I think the space is evolving very, very fast. PFPs are I would say a big catalyst in the world of sort of getting the notoriety of NFTs to the world, just because right now I sort of think of NFTs as almost like the digital age status symbol. In the past, people had cars and watches, and now it's verified Twitter profile pictures. You're starting to get some guys in the finance world, sort of Goldman Sachs guys, basically bought an ape, and straight away he has some form of credibility in the NFT space. So I think in the next few months you're going to start seeing a lot of non-NFT based companies try and get a foothold and try and get that authenticity in the space by acquiring these so-called blue chip PFP projects.
Yeah, I think you raised a couple interesting points there. One, that you're seeing, the sunken cost of purchasing a high-end digital asset. Namely, right now it's been Bored Apes, sometimes CryptoPunks as well. You are seeing that the celebrities or influencers or so on and so forth, they use this as sort of a segue into whatever project that they are either presenting or collaborating with, and they're trying to use it as like a proxy for credibility in the space. And that's definitely something anecdotally that I've seen repeatedly. I think also, to your point, on artists, I myself have I've never purchased physical art in my life. I was gifted a piece of art from Daniel Allen Cohen. This is addictive. This is art, but never really purchased anything. And in this space, you quite easily spend 5 to 10 ETH, which is at the peak you're talking 25 to 50 grand on digital art. And I think it's just it's a touch point on how this entire life is moving digital. It's moved digital from social media. It's moved digital from payments, and now I was kind of the last vestigial part of an age where we grew up without tech and we grew into tech, and I have a younger brother who was born into tech, and the digital atmosphere is just much more prevalent in our day-to-day lives than it ever has been. We're starting to see that value flow through to the digital side in terms of assets, and it's almost interesting that for everyone that harps on NFTs, whether it be profile picture or other collectibles, or maybe not collectibles altogether, the main sticking point is that there's no value, and these are just pictures, and I can right click save it, or I can copy it, or I flip it around backwards and now it's worth this. The interesting thing is when you get into the discussion of what really has value at the end of the day. We talk about gold as like this store of value. There's discussions on its utility in terms of scarcity, and maybe it's being used in computer chips and in tech, but it has value because we decided it does. There are scarcer metals out there. There are heavier metals out there. There are, there are all kinds of metals, ones with more utility, more use cases, but we've decided on gold, and primarily, way back when, it was because it was shiny. As a status symbol. So I do agree with you that I think that this is starting to turn into a status symbol. I think that some of the disagreements or skepticism about like the attrition-based method of these status symbols is worthwhile to listen to. I someone emailed me today and said, if all these NFT projects are working on, digital monkeys, there's millions of species out there, won't this all just, devolve? And I think what people are missing is that, like, the image on the NFT is part of the puzzle, but it's not as important as, like, the underlying community, which is backed by, you can talk about the metadata of there only being so many. It's basically a VIP pass. There's all sorts of functions that you can go through with it, but you're really buying, like you said, a status symbol, and not in a, like, affluent, like, I have too much money to spend, but more in a pay to play type of environment where if you want to be a part of this ecosystem and you want to be directly involved, you don't have to have the asset, but by having the asset, you are predisposed to that community, and they will help you and you will help them, basically pro bono in perpetuity. And I think that's a rather interesting concept with something that's face value just a picture of an animal that's RNG'd 10,000 different ways. So the breadth is pretty wild there. Um, in that same notion, whether it's the right click save or what, the common pushback for this market is that this is a fad, this is going to fizzle out. These are all scams of marginal buyer theory. These have seemed to fade away a bit with people like Justin Bieber and Tom Brady, and like people that are traditional influencers starting to get into the space. But what would you say to those skeptics that still don't fully come to terms with what we on the other side of the spectrum have agreed upon as market value?
You know what's interesting? I always liken it to the fashion industry. There's in the fashion industry, there's different brands that work on different trends, and their whole goal is through marketing and through imagery to really sort of form a community that really fall in love with their products. And each year the products change, right? So each year it's a new line of products which obsoletes the previous line of products. And in the fashion world, you look at what's happening with LMVH and all these sort of brands, right? They're starting to, well, good example is is Alex Arnold, right? Who was one of the sons who did Rimowa. He was the first one to take a company which was look at Rimowa, more than 100 years of history, but then he melded it with popular culture. He had Rihanna, he had Nobu Chef, and all these guys collaborate with this sort of brand, and through collaboration he sort of turned this sort of brand that was kind of viewed as just a plain sort of metal luggage brand into a luxury travel brand. And this is similar things that I sort of see in sort of example with the Bored Ape Yacht Club. It is, like we said before, it is all about the community, and to the skeptics out there, buy an ape, do a tweet, and straight away, right, you'll feel the energy of the community, and these new internet communities that are being built are so powerful and so strong versus a fashion community where if you have a particular handbag and your friend has a particular handbag, another friend has a particular handbag, sure, you all have Birkin, you're all sort of part of the same sort of gang, but it's only it's only based on physical sort of you and your friends, right? But all of a sudden with an internet community, you know what, everyone around the world is connected through these sort of apes, and like we said before, it almost becomes this sort of membership club, this incredible community, and when you have communities, right, that's when projects really sort of flourish and sort of grow and develop, and I kind of feel like when you're part of the Bored Ape community, you are amongst other holders which are founders of all the most coolest and interesting companies in the world. You're amongst this really sort of unique, creative sort of community, and similar parallels, right? If we take a macro sort of view of that, and you take sort of a snapshot out, that's really the NFT community. The NFT community, if you look at it, is made up of all the creators of the internet. It's very it's no matter how rich or how poor you are, if you have the ability to have a laptop and you have creativity and you have the drive to create, you can create art and sell it. It's very it's very decentralized, it's very open to the world, and I honestly believe it's a movement that's going to change the fabric of our society.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of I think if something like a Bored Ape was trading at a couple $100, I don't think there would be so much outcry. I think a lot of the outcry stems from the rapid and expansive ROI that's been displaced by these apes were priced at zero point zero 0.08 ETH, I believe, a year ago, and now they're trading. I think it's 115 ETH. So that's a pretty massive gain. You've seen millionaires minted. I mean, we've seen the dark side of it with hacks and phishing attacks, but there's a lot of value that got created for better or for worse. And I think a lot of the argument stems from the fact that a lot of money was generated and that person was not a part of it. But what I always like to look back to is that, the people think that the crypto ethos is equality. And I just don't believe that to be true. I think it's much more centered around equal opportunity, where like for those that remember, like the day that Bored Ape Yacht Club was minted, it actually took, I'm pretty sure it took a while to sell out. I think that same day Larva Labs came out with Meebits, and I think that like it kind of like stole the show. And this was before mints were selling out rapidly, and I think mints would stay open for 3 or 4 hours, and so everyone had the chance to go and pay that 0.08 ETH. And what people also don't understand is that even if you had a look at Bored Ape Yacht Club at 0.08 ETH or 1 ETH or 2 ETH, it takes a lot of like physical restraint and like restriction to say I believe in this price independent. It goes to 10 ETH. You made like $30,000. A lot of people would sell. Some people didn't. To hold from 0.08 all the way to 115 to still hold today and say I'm not selling, like that doesn't mean that they got lucky. That doesn't mean that, oh, I wish I had that opportunity, because everybody had the opportunity if they had the knowledge of the NFT space. It's just that some people didn't actually do it. Like I had a look at Bored Apes. I think I found them at like 5 ETH, and I just didn't want to buy it. I had a look at CryptoPunks at 10 ETH. I didn't want to buy it, and that doesn't mean that I'm going to sit here and be mad at the people that own it at 110 ETH. Like it's a if you remove the price, it's an interesting like social theory, and like like it at the very least we've created like social community on steroids. And I think what you said about being online and removing the physical boundaries, I think that's very important, because the for those that game, I have a lot of friends that like I've met for the first time in the last 5 years, but I've been playing games with for over a decade. And like you can make connections with people without ever physically meeting them. It's not geographical barriers. It's more um, likeness and idea barriers. So you're putting together a bunch of people with the same understanding and the same enthusiasm about the same topic, and all of a sudden you're creating partnerships. I saw someone have their family do tax returns for someone else in the same NFT Discord because they had capital gains on NFTs that they sold. I've seen people help each other out in like really interesting ways that don't necessarily have to do with the NFT project itself. And I think that's like the secret sauce that gets missed from people looking in from the outside, is that how can this picture of an ape be worth so much money? And at the end of the day, it's the same as being a part of a very exclusive club, and or having a taxi medallion. Like there's only so many. And
Yeah, no, I think it's spot on. What I mean, and it's kind of like like if you look at even watches, for example, right? Like I think watches are like almost like well, I would say not quite parallel, but like watches are a good example of they're a status symbol. People wear it to be seen. And if you look at the watch prices, if you compare Rolexes to Patek Philippe's to Richard Mille, if you look at Patek Philippe, an example, right? Who would have thought the most recent Tiffany and Co. one sold for $5.5 million for a stainless steel watch? You know what I mean? And because of that, right? I kind of feel like what the strategy they used for that watch was very similar to what's happening in NFTs. Get a watch, send it to auction, make it set a record price for charity, then basically all the up and coming watches, 500 editions, are going to be worth millions. And the retail price, 50,000 or maybe even less, probably $30,000 retail price. And now that watch is probably retailing for over $1 million. And what is it about? Status symbol. It's all about status. You have one of these particular watches, and some guy sees you, hey, like I want to work with you, or I want to collaborate with you. And I think similar to exactly what we said before, similar to Bored Ape Yacht Club, right? If you see someone with a Bored Ape, profile picture, you're like, okay, you know what? I vibe with this guy. You know what? he's my boy. You know, we both believe in the same sort of things. You know what? Maybe we even share the same ape skin. We both got the psychedelic ape skin, right? Or we both have a gold ape. You know, we're brothers. You know, and I think the designer of, well, the head designer, you know, I spoke with Seneca, who designed the Bored Apes, right? You know, like there's a lot of, you know, there's a lot of thinking behind that sort of project. It wasn't just apes that were put together without thought. You know, every single item that was part of that were things sourced from, you know, historical, or things sourced from society, from culture, right? So anyone, it's actually really clever. You know, anyone that, you know, can somehow relate themselves to the apes, whether it's through the color of the eyes, or the gestures, or the clothing, you know, and that was a very clever thing, you know. Yeah, so I think, you know, that's a PFP world, right? But if we talk about, you know, I do think, you know, the actual one-of-one art world is going to be the next sort of biggest wave, because all these guys that are buying PFP projects, you know, it's like they've collected the PFP project. What's next? You know what I mean? And we've already seen it with, you know, a few of the crypto funds. You know, when they first started sort of collecting art, what did they go for? Right, they went for all the so-called blue chips, right? And where did the so-called blue chips come from? They were the most previously, you know, highest paid arts from artists that were creating from, you know, the 2017 2018 era. So you get the guys like Xcopy. You know, I personally really am a big fan of Xcopy. You know, his style and his aesthetic really, I know, yeah, like he just represented NFT art. You know, one of the first artists I saw when I, you know, got into NFTs was Xcopy. And in my mind back then, I was like, okay, what is NFT art? Xcopy comes into my mind, you know, flashy kind of GIFs that sort of pulsate with crazy colors. Like that represented, you know, NFT art, you know, and I do think, you know, from PFP, people will go into the world of one-on-ones, and the world of one-on-ones, right, is a very, very beautiful realm, because that's the realm where, you know what, art rules. You know, it's not about statistical data. Sure, you know, in generative art, it can be about statistical data, but even in generative art, you know, beauty and aesthetics still triumphs over sort of rarities of stats. You know, and I do believe that, you know, the blue chips that are happening at the moment, eventually, you know, at the moment they are sort of crypto native artists, but eventually, you know what, some of these non-crypto native artists are going to come into the space and start creating blue chips. And that hasn't happened yet, but I reckon, you know, by the end of this year, that's going to happen.
Yeah, so that's a good way to dovetail into the next point. Where do you see this space in 5 to 10 years? I think you're more focused on the art and collectibles side than the other sectors. So maybe if you want to focus there, where do you see the art and collectible space moving forward for the next half decade?
You know what I think? Like recently, you know, I've been sort of diving into a lot of funny enough, a lot of the gaming NFTs, and you know, I guess in the art world, right, you know, you buy a piece that really connects with yourself, right? You buy a piece that you really fall in love with, and it's very beautiful, and then you meet the artist, and you get along really well with the artist as well, and it's a connection between you and the artist. Enter in, you know, the world of gaming. You know, all of a sudden you've got an NFT that can make you over $1 million a year. You know what I mean? And when that happens, right, you know what, some of these artists, right, some of the top NFT artists in the space at the moment, right, they're very heavily sort of immersed in the space. So they're not just artists, right? They're guys that are, you know, playing these NFT games themselves. They're guys that are, you know, scouring Twitter for the next sort of crypto projects. They're kind of this new generation of artists that are super immersive in the world of crypto and NFTs. And all of a sudden, when these gaming NFTs come out that are making the millions, that are, hold a minute, I can turn my art into, you know, a gaming sort of device that I can then use in my metaverse. So, you know, a good friend of mine, you know, Fuck Render, right? You know, he's probably one of the first to do it, right? He's creating these, you know, he launched these larger crystal collections, which can be utilized in his, you know, Fuck Renderverse, and you know, he's just launched Lucid as well, which is another metaverse. So I do believe the future of NFTs and digital art will be these super immersive, you know, pieces of code that interact in the metaverse. So you'll need augmented reality glasses, you'll need virtual reality glasses. There'll be audio, visual combined. So to think of stuff that's, you know, takes all the best elements of you know, I'll give you an example. You know, Pack is a great example, right? It uses so much game theory in his NFTs. You know, his latest one allows people to merge, you know, circles. You know, and you know, the largest ever sale of an artist ever. I think he hit like nearly hit 90 or 100 million, you know, in like 40 minutes. So the future of NFTs will be a combination of all these wonderful things, and things you find in DeFi, things you find in you know, in everything. They'll all be combined, and they'll be immersive, they'll be exploratory, they'll be, you know, they'll have utility in metaverses. So um, I'm not sure when that will happen. It's already starting to happen now. But yeah, for sure, it'll be a combination of all those things, and it'll be super exciting.
Yeah, I mean, a good, you know, you're rattling off a pretty good list of names there. I particularly like the printer from Mad Dog Jones, the recursive, like, generative art piece that spits out new pieces, but there can be a jam. So there's like a decision tree, and there's like truncated decision lines based on like the printer jam. So I found that one rather interesting. I think that, you know, I pretty much agree that, like, an NFT, you know, and I've said this ad nauseum at this point, but in my opinion, NFT is a wrapper, and in that wrapper, you can put things, and you know, we've seen to date probably what you'd consider to be like rudimentary, like, test use cases. I think as you go down the line, you'll begin to see the true, like, nature of what programmable art, programmable gaming assets, programmable collectibles, what they can actually do. You know, you can add on utility, you can add on unlockables or gateway access or airdrops or secondary issues. Like, these are all, like, ideas that, like, they're not like reinventing the wheel, but they kind of create a new mechanism to do things that previously couldn't really be done. You know, it's very hard for, you know, you always hear people say, I was the first one that listened to artist XYZ, or I watched this movie before you, and there's no way to prove it, you know, but all of a sudden you own, you know, Post Malone NFTs from 2015, and you can verifiably say, I was the first, you know, one of the first fans of Post Malone. And in 2025, when Post Malone is, you know, you can't get 2 minutes with him without paying $1 million, he'll say, anyone that owns my NFTs from pre 2005, I made them non-transferable, so they're only with people that I know were here early. I will do XYZ, and only you guys can get in there. You can use a PO app, you can use whatever you want. That has value. Maybe it's not financial value, but it definitely has emotional value. And I think that's the hard part. You have a lot of people coming in and trying to do, you know, fundamental analysis. You have a lot of people coming in to try to do, like, traditional methods, but there is a significant chunk of this space that is emotional value. And it's really, really hard to gauge, because everyone's going to say it's overpriced. Everyone's going to say it doesn't make sense. But the collectibles market has existed long before this space. Like, CS:GO gun skins have existed forever. Beanie Babies was a crazy, you know, fad that came and went. RuneScape, Neopets. You have the sports collectible industry right now. You know, you have cards selling for millions of dollars. You know, it's a piece of cardboard if you really want to look at it. You know, but it's the value of, you know, you have it be scarcity, you have it be community value, you have it be emotional value. There's a ton of unlockables in there that I think people will slowly begin to understand, but don't quite yet.
Oh, and to add to that as well, you know, like there's going to be a massive influx in social tokens. You know, guys in the music industry are literally, I've seen so many interesting projects just about to launch in the next few months, and basically, you know, every single music site is eventually going to have their own, like what you said, right, have their own NFT that gets them access into their own sort of fan club and fan base. It's going to be wild, you know, and when that happens, you know what, one day NFTs will become normal. You know what I mean? Like, NFTs will just become, you know, just a normal thing, and you know, every music artist will have an NFT. You know, and when that space comes, right, I kind of feel like that's when, you know what, all the countries, you know, maybe NFTs is the thing that pushes all countries and nations to get more into crypto. You know what I mean? Like, can you imagine? You know, like even Twitter's already doing it, all this sort of stuff. I honestly believe, right, like NFTs maybe the thing that push all the industries into crypto, you know, into accepting Ethereum, Bitcoin, all this sort of stuff. I think it's inevitable, you know. Yeah. So to answer the question, I think, yeah, like, where's it going to head next 5 to 10 years? You know, I think we're seeing that NFTs are here to stay. You know, crypto may drop and all this sort of stuff up, but, you know, buying art is a completely different world. You know, the people that are getting into NFTs now aren't large holders of Ethereum. They're guys that, you know, if they want to buy an NFT, they convert cash into Ethereum and Ethereum straight away into NFT. So I think, yeah, like I think NFTs are only going to get bigger. For the naysayers and the people that are like, oh, it's a joke, it's a fad, you know, whatever. But you know what? Buy an NFT, experience it for yourself. You know, but I do agree with you. You know, it's for people to get into NFTs is not the easiest. You know, like you have to set up a wallet, you have to, you know, somehow find ETH, and then the barriers to entry are quite difficult. And even with curation, it's like, you know what, for people that are looking at one-on-ones NFTs, it's difficult. I remember when I first looked for my first one-on-one, I was like, hey, like, who do I buy? Who are the artists? You know, like who are the top guys? And most of the top guys nowadays, you know, for a normal person, you're outpriced straight away, right? Like if you want a top guy, they're all in the millions of dollars. There's no way a new person can enter that space. However, you know, like, you know, it's like, then that's the whole point of art and internet with AOI, right? It's all about the discovery. It's like, you know what, I've discovered the most incredible artists through speaking with artists. I'll just say, hey, like, you know, because artists naturally have an incredible design eye. They're super connected to their industry. They absolutely love what they're doing. And when you ask an artist, who are your favorite artists? Man, some of the artists that they recommend you is incredible. You know what I mean? So it's really, you know what, it's kind of like crypto on Twitter, right? You follow trails. And I kind of felt like in the world of NFTs and art, right, you have to just follow the trails, you know, follow the trails of artists, follow the trails of collectors, and you know what, reach out, inbox them, speak with them, ask them questions. You know, the space is so open and so friendly. It's mind-blowing. You could never, you know, back many years ago with traditional galleries, right? Like, good luck trying to find the artist on a phone call and having a chat with them. You can't do that, right? But nowadays with NFT artists, you reach out, hey, what's up? They're like, hey, like, you know, what's up? You know, it's awesome.
And I think that's a good corollary to this entire space. Where, you know, in DeFi, if you have a question, I've never been able, like, if I have a question about any protocol or project, you can literally DM the founder or DM a core member, and they'll respond. And like that is not a normal. You know, we've become very we've become very spoiled in this space. The communication lines that we've developed. Anyway, AOI, you've been very generous with your time. Thank you so much for coming on. Can you let people know where to find out more about you and what you guys are doing over at AOI?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Our Twitter is at Art on Internet. Our website's AOI.com. And for our sort of whitelist membership, just go to whitelist.art. And yeah, and this month we're launching an incredible series by Jake Ferry. And yeah, it's going to be super exciting. It's taken him, you know, almost a year to create, you know, 1,440 individual hand-drawn images. And I think it's going to be, yeah, it's going to be an incredible collection. So all the listeners listening, make sure you jump on that drop, because it's going to be pretty special.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Have a good night.
Awesome, Tosh. All the best. Take care.
Cheers.
See you.